Let's start out with the first question. And, for Patty and Jamie, how has COVID impacted our electoral process in Minnesota and the nation? Can you guys give just some insight and your experience around that? You want to start out, Jamie?
I suppose I'll have to unmute myself. Okay, so how has COVID impacted elections? Significantly. I'm sorry, I'll start by, I know you guys introduced me, but my name is Jamie. I work for Secretary of State Steve Simon in his St. Paul office, though we haven't been to the office since March. So I work closely with Steve doing his outreach to anyone externally from our office, as well as managing his schedule and calendar. I am one of only 2 people in our 11-person administrative team who has ever lived outside of the Twin Cities. We've got 11 folks that work for Steve and our admin team, and only me and one other person. I lived in Duluth for quite a while, and then I also have spent time doing different organizing and political projects up on the Iron Range. So lots of little bits of times just kind of interacting with my coworkers around what it really does mean to live outside of the Twin Cities. So the first question we have here is, how has COVID impacted elections? And like I said, significantly. We did pass a set of laws back at the end of the legislative session, and I want to say May, that allowed for a bunch of technical changes in order to run an election in a pandemic. We have been considering since March that we simply cannot know what the world is going to look like in August and November, and that we have to assume that this is going to be a public health crisis. And so we have been operating since March under the idea that we need to be prepared to be in a full-blown outbreak in the middle of actual election day in either August or November. So we changed a few laws around this. For example, you normally have to set your polling locations by December 31st of the year before. But there were at least 42 locations we could find across the state that were in senior assisted living facilities. And so we definitely needed to get the polling places out of the buildings that very vulnerable populations were living in. So we did allow for folks to make changes to polling locations throughout the state. We also encouraged people to take polling locations out of schools. And so a lot of voters all across the state are going to be voting in different places than they normally do this year. For example, the city of Austin previously had 9 different polling places. 7 of them were in schools, and 1 of them was in a senior assisted living facility. And so they actually changed it so that all 9 polling places are going to be in a giant event center at a hotel. So everyone who lives in Austin, Minnesota is going to be voting in a new location. And that's just one example this year of how many voters are going to be going to different places. The other big switch that we allow people to make when we change their polling places is allowing more townships and small cities throughout the state to vote by all mail balloting. Assuming that a lot of folks on here are for rural places, but just to give a background, in Minnesota, all townships outside of the 7-county metro and all cities outside the metro with 400 or fewer voters can choose to vote entirely by mail, so that every registered voter is mailed an absentee ballot that they can then mail back in. In that same period where we allowed people to change their polling places, we allowed people to also switch to mail if they wanted to. And as you can imagine, there was a significant jump in people who had already been on the fence moving to mail balloting. There had been a trend towards mail balloting in the first place, but that trend continued in this space. So those are just some of the laws that have changed around this. We also are being sued by a handful of organizations, and I am not a lawyer, and I'm not going to talk about our lawsuits at all, but there are a handful of lawsuits. For example, in the upcoming primary, We know we are not going to be requiring witnesses for absentee ballots or mail-in ballots. Normally, if you get an absentee ballot to your house, you vote it, you wrap it up, and you have to have a witness sign it. And there was an organization that sued us saying they shouldn't have to interact with another person and potentially expose yourself in order to witness your ballot. So that requirement has been waived for the August primary, to be determined yet for the November general, but there are a few other small technical changes that are going to potentially change depending on how some lawsuits go over the course of the next week or two. And then just on a more social rather than technical note, we are spending, like Brianna and Hannah are, all of our time and energy trying to convince people to vote from home. Anybody who wants to in Minnesota can order an absentee ballot to be mailed to their house, either by going online and doing it on our website or by filling it out a form and mailing it into their local elections office, and can vote absentee. That has been rising significantly in the last couple of years. In 2016 and 2018, we had around 23-24% of voters voting absentee. Oh, I forgot that I told you guys I would find these numbers. So I'm going to find them on my phone while Patty is speaking and then get back to you. But I will find you the numbers about the dramatic increase in people who have applied for an absentee ballot this year. The numbers of people who have even applied this year have gone up dramatically. We are Steve's kind of goal, which we can't really control, is hoping to get that number up around 50% this year from 25. It averages out across Minnesota that there are about 1,000 people per precinct polling location, which folks know is very different in rural Minnesota than it is in Minneapolis. But if we can get that number down by 50%, and only have an average of 500 people per polling place going to the polls to vote, that will be a significant, oh, somebody posted the numbers up here. Thank you so much, Anne Marie. And so if we can get that number down to around 500 of average people per polling place, that'll make a big difference on people's capacity to socially distance and stay apart in their polling location. Wonderful. So I think that's all, and I will check in if I have more updated numbers than the internet does while Patty is speaking.
Great. Well, Patty, let's hand that over to you of how you see COVID has impacted our electoral process, and just from all your experience, as a county leader, just this big change in polling places is, it's a good thing as far as COVID, but it's interesting to think about how counties are going to be able to communicate that information out to voters. So Patty, I'll turn it over to you.
All righty. Yeah, Jamie, thanks. You just covered everything so great. Like Jamie said, the jump in absentee should be huge. It should be at 75% would be my goal, but that's me. Vote by mail is huge. And in Blue Earth County alone, I think they picked up 3 or 4 more locations that switched to vote by mail. That one of them was close to 1,000 voters. So, that's very helpful for the county. I know as a county official, absentee or vote by mail is much easier to do than staff precincts. Counties don't normally staff precincts. That's usually a city or township job. But in Blue Earth County, we actually handle for Mankato. So I have that ability to talk to both city and town. And the city of Mankato's precincts this year had to get changed. Like Jamie said, one was in a nursing home. We took them out of the schools years ago because of we actually had people that couldn't vote because they had restraining orders and couldn't go to schools. And there was nothing in the law that allowed them to vote absentee. It was really bizarre. So we took everything out of the schools when the dangers in schools started. So in Blue Earth County in Mankato, they have had to do the same thing that Jamie talked about in Austin, is find a huge location to put some really big precincts into, or precincts in their one polling place, so that they can kind of share judges wherever they're needed. it's going to be, it's hard when you have to man two different kinds of elections. I mean, really, the counties are running two elections. They're running precincts and training election judges, and then they're running their in-house operation of getting the ballots out, updating voter registration, getting the ballots back in. Everything's electronic. So when the mail comes in, you know, the minute your ballot gets into a county, within 2 days, for sure 5, but closer to the election, it's like every day they should be winding those in. So you can check. You can see if your ballot's been accepted. And if it hasn't, you should get a new one in the mail telling you, try again. So those are the big things I see with that. COVID has changed the way business is. Okay.
Okay, I have numbers.
Yay.
So so this date is actually, we update this every Friday. So there will be a new set of numbers out tomorrow, but these numbers are from last Friday. And so on the same date as last Friday in 2016, 20,422 people had applied for an absentee ballot. On that same date in 2018, 38,621 had applied for an absentee ballot. And I won't ask you all to take yourselves off of mute to guess, but just go ahead and make a guess in your head of possibly where it's at this year. Okay, this year, last Friday, it was 469,906 people had already applied for an absentee ballot. The number that had been returned as of last Friday was 167,823. So somewhere around a ballpark of about a fourth to a third of people have already returned their absentee ballots for the primary election happening in August.
If I can add, I think Mike Stahlberger, who runs elections for Blue Earth County now, said yesterday, if he could go off of what everything was returned so far, he has a higher voter turnout than the last 2 elections.
We're actually anticipating a higher voter turnout in this August primary than usual because of the number of people who, when you apply for an absentee ballot, you can apply for both August and November at the same time. So we think it's possible that there's a significant group of people that applied for both in June or July, who normally would not vote in the primary, but we're like, okay, cool, they sent a ballot to my house. So we're going to be interested to see what kind of increased turnout there is in the August primary because of that little interesting connection there.